Good
Buonasera
morning, everybody.
Yeah, and buonasera from
from
Italy too.
Buonasera.
Live from Italy and California. The best of both worlds. Uh, Welcome, everybody. This is Annalisa Durr with Goddess Matters, and my co-hostess with the mostest, Dr. Andrea Slaminski.
Good morning. Good morning.
And today we are joined by my friend, Lori DiGuardi.
Yes.
Ciao, Lori.
Ciao, buonasera. It's good to be
Buenas
here.
Oh, it's so lovely to have you. Lori and I met almost 2 years ago now on a Black Madonna pilgrimage tour with Alessandra Belloni. And I just really enjoyed Lori's presence and energy from the beginning, and we've stayed connected. And I'm really, really excited to have her here to talk about her journey turning sacred rage into social action, or reclaiming rage as a place of power and transformation for herself. So given that, I just want to remind everybody really quickly before we get started to like this episode, leave a comment, share it with your friends, especially the people who need that message of honoring their sacred rage, and also subscribe to the channel. And we're here with you live in the chat, so if you have anything to say, please engage with us. And Lori, okay, we're going to start with you and your origin story. So let us know how this journey to reclaim your sacred rage began.
Okay. Hmm. Well, when I was a young woman, I used to joke that I wanted to be a bitch. And it was a joke, I thought, but it was really a deeper part of me that was so hungry for being able to honor myself because I was raised in a family that had, I was born in poverty and there was a lot of physical violence. And I went on to be a young woman uh, with a partner who physically abused me for almost 8 years. So, and what I mean by that, I mean, I was literally beaten up, strangled, and all those things often over the years. And so I was a real pushover. And I was afraid of anger because I thought anger was the thing that was hurting me and threatening my life. So that's how it all started for me. I was completely disconnected from my anger.
Can I ask you a question about that? When you say that you thought that the anger was what was hurting you, is it because it was
Mhm.
coming from your partner at you, or it was the anger inside of you that was hurting you?
No, I suppressed my anger. I did not allow myself to even acknowledge anger. So I never even felt it because it was so deeply repressed. And because I had a lot of trauma in my life, I was living from my head. A lot of people who have trauma in their life aren't even present in their body. So that was my story. My father
Mhm.
was angry. He had a lot of rage from his origin story. And my mother was more like me. She just, I never really saw her. I think I saw her get angry once in her life, and it came out in a way that was also abusive because many people still today, and one of the reasons, hopefully, why we're talking today is to really talk about what anger is, and so that we can tell the truth on it, the truth about anger, because it's not what we think, it's what we feel inside of ourselves. And yeah, so my origin story was that I was the victim, or I was victimized by the unhealthy rage of other people. And therefore, I was afraid of it and didn't allow myself to be angry, which meant that I just kept suffering more at the hands of others.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
can I just jump in for 1 second?
yeah, just 1 second. I forgot to contextualize the very beginning that Lori has written a book on this as well and a TED Talk. So sorry, I got so excited about the Black Madonna tour. I forgot to mention that part. So that's one of the reasons we invited her specifically on because she's done a lot of work with this. Okay, now back to you, Andrea.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I just wanted to honor your journey a little bit and just um, make a little bit of a loving comment on the fact that in your origin story, you said that you found yourself to be a pushover, right? Because
Yes,
you weren't expressing your anger. I think you were traumatized, right? I think you were traumatized by
yes.
family anger and by what you were experiencing. And I
Mhm.
think that unfortunately, shame and guilt and self-blaming are a part of that for a lot of women who are in that situation. And I would say that
Yes.
that your words saying that you were a pushover are witness to that fact, and that I would say, in fact, you are not a pushover. You heroically endured until you could make a move.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you for that. I had no sense of self. I had, I've written a lot on anger and in my book, and when I spoke the TEDx Talk, and whenever anybody allowed me to speak about it for some years, it's been a while since I really focused on anger, was I would say you can't have healthy relationships unless you have a healthy relationship with yourself.
Mhm.
And that means having healthy boundaries. And the only way to have healthy boundaries is to be in touch with the energy of anger, because anger is not just this fire and rage. It's not. Healthy anger is simple. It's simply a thing that says, oh, no, I can't help you tonight because I need more sleep. I mean, even that feeds, that little bit of anger feeds our ability to say yes and no to what matters to us. But I didn't have any of that. That's why I said I was a pushover. And I used to also say, when I used to speak about anger, is that, if you're tired of being a doormat, there is only one way to stop that. You have to get up off the floor. And anger is that energy of change to get you up off the floor.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like an inner fire to help keep you going.
Well, anger is, an organic part of us. All our emotional energy is. We label it names: sadness, anger, whatever we label that, but it starts in our body, and it's an energy. Just like our hunger that we feel. Oh, it's time to eat, or I'm tired, it's time to sleep. The energy of anger within us tells us that something wants our attention. I mean, really, for me, anger is our best friend, because it always has our back if we are connected to it and we can understand its message to us, because it can be very subtle, the change or the thing that it wants from us, that it needs to tell us. But it really is a message that says, hey, something needs your attention in this moment, or with this subject, or with this person, with whatever's going on that, that's happening in that moment, or that you're thinking about. If you feel some type of energy of anger, it's something wants your attention. It's about you.
Yeah, I think a lot of times anger is tied, whether it's righteous cultural anger, right, or personal anger, because I know, you talking about today taking our anger and turning it into to positive action, that anger is often tied to a personal wound, right? That there's a personal wounding, and then from that, the anger develops, right?
Hmm.
Well, I want to say no. Yes and no, because anger is just an organic energy that we all have, and it informs our decisions. So I think that a lot of people believe anger is like rage, is like this big thing, but it really can be. So I also, let me back up here. I researched and I studied for a while the 5 elements of traditional Chinese medicine. And the element of wood is the element that is related to anger. You have the liver and the gallbladder officials and the meridians. And in Chinese medicine, the liver is the blueprint or the architect of your life. You have a vision for your life, right? And the gallbladder official helps you make decisions to honor that vision so you can achieve it, right? So if we think about, we have a vision for, so by the way, back when I was a younger woman and a kid, I had no vision for my life. So therefore, none of my decisions honored me, because I didn't even have a vision. I didn't even know who I was, right? I was just somebody's punching bag, more or less. So in Chinese medicine, and we can even just put that aside, because if we have a vision for our life, if we know what matters to us, then our decisions should be based upon what matters to us. Does this honor? Does this move me forward? Does this help me create the life I want? And if it's a no, then we need to say no. But when we start saying yes to people, when we really want to say no, that's when we start feeling resentment, or we can have regret. That's also part of the energy of anger. So it can show up in all of our ways, just by simply setting personal boundaries, which is not from a wound, it's just from being an organism. It's from being alive. So the bigger anger feelings.
So then do you think that anger just spontaneously manifests without being a reaction to something?
It's a response to something. So for example, I mean, think of the other emotional energies, like if you lost something, or you lost somebody you love, or you lost your job, or you see something in the news and it hurts your heart, we may get sad. That sadness is an energy that's living within us, and it's just normal. It doesn't come from necessarily a trauma, it's just normal. So, so when we need to say yes to something or say no to something, we label, we may not think that it's the energy of anger, but anger helps us say yes to the things that matter to us. It becomes a bigger energy when there's bigger things going on, and perhaps we've ignored the little ones. But it's really about, you know, our skin is our boundary. I'm me, you're you. And anger helps us honor all of us within our boundary. So we need to have a healthy boundary with our vision in life and the decisions to honor what matters to us. So that's just like the healthy foundation of anger that most people don't consider anger, because most people consider anger some big thing, some explosive thing, or just, yeah, something bigger. But it's not. It's actually just a normal everyday thing that we don't even think about sometimes when we say yes or no or decide to do something.
Right.
It's like the little pieces of it before it gets bigger. And then sometimes things happen through trauma or just through experience that warrants a bigger energy, right? Because smaller things might have smaller responses, bigger things have bigger responses.
Yeah, I really love how you're connecting like all these little nuanced feelings on like around or circulating anger. So you have resentment and would you say regret and rage is like maybe more extreme. So I'm finding that really fascinating. But I want to make sure that we also go back to your origin story for a second and figure out how you got from where you were to this journey of owning your inner bitch, your anger, or working with your anger. What happened?
Well, I thought that I left that all behind me, and I got married and had 2 babies and thought I was living my dream. But seemingly overnight, my marriage ended. And my ex was not very respectful. And every trauma that I had came rushing back, and I could barely function. So I started doing talk therapy, which was helpful because I was living in my head at that point, because I had ignored all of the signs within my body, including, anger.
I think that's a really important point too, is that like our body will send us
It
signals.
tells us everything. It's our
Yeah.
It's amazing. Embodiment is so important. So I wasn't embodied. I wasn't grounded in my body. I was thinking my way through life, but I did have this a marriage that I thought was my dream marriage. I had 2 babies. My daughter was 2, my son was an infant, and my marriage ended, and I could barely function. And through my talk therapy, my therapist suggested I try something to get me in my body, and I decided martial arts. And within the first month of this Tang Soo Do karate, I have a black belt. I don't practice anymore, but
Wow.
within the first month, I was taught that simply because you exist, you deserve respect. And everybody in the dojang had to respect one another, and everybody had to bow to the black belts. Even though I was in my 30s and there was like 16-year-old black belts, I had to show them respect. And something happened in me that, I mean, it was just, it happened that way. And I was on a phone call with my soon-to-be ex-husband at the time, and he started speaking to me in a way that was really, it was mean. It was unnecessary and very disrespectful. And all of a sudden, this inner karate came out through me, and I said, if you continue talking to me this way, I will hang up. Healthy boundaries. I had never said that to anyone in my whole life. And I was 36, about 36 years old. And he continued to start talking to me like that. I hung up and I put the phone down. I looked out into the backfield and I started crying because I didn't even recognize myself. But that was the first time I made a decision to have a healthy boundary around me and tell somebody they couldn't do that. And let me say too that this whole idea of being a bitch, that came about in 5 years later when I was in a pretty devastating car accident. I had whiplash, and everybody wanted a piece of me. And all of a sudden was like, "Oh, will they just leave me alone?" So all of a sudden this anger, the car accident kind of broke open my body and all of this anger. And that's when I thought, I'm going to write a book. And the title came to me, Anger 101, The Healthy Approach to Being a Bitch. And I just knew I have to write this book. But then I got healthy again from the whiplash. I put the book aside. I was, a mom. I had little kids. And it was only then another 3 years later that I actually wrote the book. And I only wrote the book after I gave the TEDx talk because so many people came up to me and said, "Oh my God, I needed to hear that." And I thought, okay, I think I need to do something. So I picked the book back up. So those were the two biggest things, the divorce and starting karate, and then the accident.
Wow.
That really set me on this trajectory to get in my body, to connect to the truth within me, to have healthy relationship with myself and stop judging myself, making everything about me wrong, which trauma did to me. I thought everything was wrong about me, everything I did. And these patterns they take a while to release. But I did. It's possible. I'm living proof.
Wow. I have a question, Andrea, unless you want to go.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, we talked about wanting to discuss some of the themes in your book and how you learned to embrace your healthy anger through your relationship or through your research on the suffragettes. And so I understand that that's a slightly different facet of anger that we're talking about because we're started out talking about like personal anger, and I think the suffragette movement takes that beyond just the personal to the collective. I mean, those two things are intertwined. So what about your research with the suffragettes kind of helped you? Maybe it was the guiding force of the book, or helped frame anger in a new way. And maybe how can we understand that? This is part of the conversation to help us today.
Okay. Yeah, no,
But
that's a
let's
great
start with the
question.
first part. Let's start with the first part. What did you learn, or how did it help you write this book?
Well, let me tell you how that's the whole research into the women in the suffrage movement start for me. And it was because, I had this joke in my life, like I always wanted to be a bitch. And then fast forward to I had the accident and the title of the book came to me. And so when I started to research for the TEDx talk in 2017, I gave that in Tucson. I thought, well, where did that word come from anyway? When did women start being called bitches? Like, what's the origin story of that? And so I did a research basically on the internet, trying to find something out in America, because the word was also being used in Britain. But the research that I found in a few various sources said that the word bitch was non-existent in America, more or less, except for dogs, female dogs and stuff like that, until like the 1920s. And I thought, well, geez, what happened in the 1920s? And I thought, oh, I know what happened in the 1920s. The 19th Amendment got ratified in 1920. Women got the right to vote. Women had much more of a voice. And what happened? This word bitch arose and started to be used more and more. So it was another form. I'm getting goosebumps as I'm saying it, but it's a form of oppression, oppressing women who now had more of a voice and choice.
Right.
So, and the women in the suffrage movement, they had a lot of personal inequities. They didn't have rights to their own property. They didn't have rights to their own paycheck. Their husband got it. They couldn't pray out loud in church. They couldn't go to university. The list goes on and on. So personally, in their day-to-day, they suffered these personal inequities. And then as a collective, they saw their sisters, their mothers, their daughters, their communities. We can feel that. Women can feel this. You can see it, but you can also feel it. So it became this huge, they took it on the road. It became a movement. And it started more or less in the mid-19th century. And so, but your question was about how did it affect me when I was doing the research? Well, the women for years leading up to when they started being called bitches. That's why I say in my book, like the first bitches in America were the women in the suffrage movement, And I want to be like them because they were so freaking courageous. They never gave up. They took their platform of equality and the right to vote to Congress like over 40 years. And every single year it was either ignored or dismissed for over 40 years. So they never gave up. They knew that if they didn't benefit from the actions the change that their anger was telling them to create, that women after them would benefit from what they were trying to do. So though people called them, ugly women, troublemakers, criminal, all these awful names, bitches, they were actually women that I wanted to emulate. They were courageous. They went against all the odds. Women didn't even have their own money back then. They weren't driving cars. They weren't doing anything. And yet they did all these things around the country. It's incredible. Wow. Wherever they were allowed to have a voice, like in tea rooms or their own kitchen or in church rooms, that's what they utilized. They utilized whatever was accessible to them, and they just kept pushing the limits until, in 1919, Congress approved it all, and then it got ratified in 1920. So anyway, they never gave up. It was very inspiring.
Yeah, I'm just thinking now, like, God, even this little bit of information would be so important to hand over to the trad wife movement, to these young women that think that going back to some kind of, I'm going to call it fantasy, mythical, traditional gender roles where women are in the kitchen cooking and taking care of their families is somehow idealized or better than what we're living now. But I think it's because they don't have the living memory of what women had to fight for in the past. I mean, clearly that's one of the factors going on.
Yeah.
But just to hear it laid out that way in the way that you have is like, that's all you need to say for me to be like, no, I don't want to go back.
I'm keep getting goosebumps because I need to say something else. So, white men had the right to vote first.
Right.
Black men had the right to vote. White women were basically granted the right to vote. But because of all kinds of stumbling blocks, Black women legitimately did not have the right to vote until like 1965 or something like that. That wasn't, that was after I was born, for crying out loud, and I'm kind of old. So it's like, I mean, Black women, sometimes people, like I know some Black women who are really angry. They should be, and Asians too didn't have the right to vote with the
and Indigenous women. Yeah.
Yes. And so it doesn't go back that far. It's kind of recent. I mean, the 1920s, okay, that's 106 years ago, but 1965 or whatever that year was, is in my lifetime that Black women, women of color, couldn't vote until the Voting Rights Act was passed. It's crazy.
It is crazy. So, okay, so I interrupted you. So learning about their history impacted you in what way? How did it impact you, how you lived your life?
Well, just the knowledge of knowing that, well, let me say that when I started the research in 2016, I had already earned a Black belt. I had already started creating healthy boundaries. I had already started connecting to more embodiment. I worked with a somatic coach who helped me keep getting into my body. It was a practice all the time, going back down into my body, down into my body. And so I already had a huge change in my life. But when I started doing the research, it really inspired me because these were women who refused to give up. These were women who, other women and a lot of men, not all men, which is a phrase that we hear, not all men, right? But not all men disagreed with them. There were some men that were in these organizations with the women in the suffrage unit, but there were a lot of women who said, we don't need the right to vote. So even now today, when I see things that happen in America, I live in Italy, but I'm an American, I still vote. And I see some of the things that are done that are taking away our body autonomy and things. At first, it is so like a big sock to the gut. But then I remember the women of the suffrage movement. They didn't stop. You know, they kept going back to Congress like over 40 years until they got a vote that said yes. And then even after they got the vote, they had to wait till they had, what is it, 3/4 of the states at that time to ratify it, which was a whole nother fight that, you know, to get states to ratify this constitutional amendment. So, you know, and they had less than what we have.
Right. They didn't have
They
social media.
They didn't have money. They didn't have cars. They didn't have property. They weren't allowed to. They couldn't even like say hallelujah in church. You know, they weren't like to speak out loud. And they just didn't have hardly anything that we had. But they had this anger that said change has to happen. And it never went away because they never had equality.
Right.
They just kept going for it. And so it was very inspiring and made me feel better when this name, Anger 101, the healthy approach to being a bitch came up, because I thought, okay, yeah, I'm gonna be a bitch and I want to be like them because they're awesome, right? And so, yeah, you know, I want to be associated with them. Yeah.
I love that you've reclaimed this word bitch too. I'm like, wow, like, and like, it never occurred to me that it's a word to be reclaimed in that way, by a group of women who were, you know, suppressed um, and working or struggling to attain the rights that we benefit from today.
Yeah.
So,
And I want to say that, you know, I don't get offended when I hear the word bitch. A lot of people, a lot of women said, I can't believe you wrote that book. It's so offensive. It's so from the patriarchy. And we know when we hear something spoken, whether it's offensive or not, by the energy and the tone with which it's spoken. So when you hear a woman or a man call another person a bitch, and it's an offensive energy and a judgmental energy, that feels completely different if you're, hey, bitch. Like, I don't even use that word so much. It was more for the transformation and to make a point that that the women who were the first American bitches, by the way, I don't know if anybody said that. That's kind of what I said, but you know, it's my book. I can say what I want. So, you know, that's what I see. That's me. And you know, I want to be like them.
awesome.
So the 1900s, right? The turn of the century, right? So much started happening, you know, with the rise of what I call the rise of the archetypal feminine, I guess. And certainly the suffragette movement was a big piece of that beginning, right? So now here we find ourselves, right, with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the active pursuit of removing women's bodily autonomy from them in their choices in their life. We just saw the Supreme Court, I think it was last week, started to dismantle the Voting Rights Act, right? There's a movement within the far right in the 2025 movement where there are men coming out and saying that we should not allow women to vote, to take away the right of women's vote. So how do you, and certainly there are women that are protesting, there are women that are doing, they're active, they're whatever. So how do you suggest women come together and do something that's actually going to be effective, right? In a time where everything we've worked so hard for is being actively dismantled or attempting to be dismantled.
Yeah, that's a big question. First thing that came to me was that we can't join the people who are saying that women shouldn't have the right to vote and all these awful things that they're saying and doing, like not join their narrative, right? But stay focused on ours, have the vision, and then take step after step after step toward it and not give up. And
I think
I
a lot
also
of
want
women want to know, what are those steps? What
right,
should they be doing?
right. So I want to say this. The women in the suffrage movement in America were not violent, right? Everything they did was legal, except for Susan B. Anthony. She voted when it was illegal. But she said, I'm not paying the consequences because women didn't come up with these laws, so I'm not going to follow them. But they were not violent, right? I would say, I always go back to, and I don't know if this is the right answer, right? Because I believe that each one of us has a piece of the solution. And the solution that each of us has may not be what another woman would like. And the one thing we can't do is fight among ourselves and judge other women, because then we're joining their narrative, right? And most women have such a history of some type of trauma. And as you both probably know, some people don't heal from their trauma, or it looks different for everybody, and we have to offer some grace. So I just want to offer that because I see that so much. But you're going to say something, Annalise?
Well, also, I guess what I would want to add into this, not only just what are the steps, but what is the vision that we're all moving toward? Because I'm not sure we actually, as women, have a collective vision. I'm not
Well,
sure that's actually clear.
So that's one of the first steps, right? Because the women in the American suffrage movement, they had a collective vision. Now, there was one group of women that saw like voting rights for women, and another group had voting rights for like everybody, like a universal suffrage. They disagreed on that. They eventually did come together and formed one, and that became eventually the League of Women Voters. That started from the women in the suffrage movement. So having a collective vision is really important. I mean, every successful company, for example, has a mission statement. They have a collective vision, and they work toward that. So we do need leaders, right? We need leaders that can inspire and show us that vision that we agree with. But how do we know who to follow? How do we know what steps to take? And this is like where I focused on, is getting in touch with my own personal anger in my body and listening to its message for me. So I want to say that starting from like the smallest pieces of it, it may be that you're greatest at writing documents or letters or making phone calls. Other women might be great at forming communities and leading others. Like everybody's good at something. We can't expect everybody to do everything. That's just not effective.
Like
So,
someone else might be making the food for the organized
yes,
protest.
we can't judge each other, because again, then we're joining their narrative about judging and we're not good enough or whatever. So I worked for 15 years on behalf of a community in East Africa. I raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to help underprivileged children and community to have fundamental needs. Everybody did a little bit of something different. What I did as a leader in that is I held the vision, and I was able to inspire people, and I was able to offer different smaller visions under the big vision that people could attain by taking their own personal steps that were right, those steps that were right for each person. And we achieved such greatness. So that, and I also have my master's degrees in organizational and strategic leadership. So we need a vision and we need leaders, and we need to allow everybody to do their part.
Right.
And we can ask people, like, what is your part, right?
Right. But
And yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm thinking back to the oh my God, the Pussy Hat movement. No, the Women's March. There we go. Right? Where we were all riled up by this collective anger. Oh my God, not all of us, but those of us that were, but oh my God, this terrible, snake oil salesman, pedophile, sexist gangster basically has been even those of us who knew back then,
yeah.
right? Is elected. Oh my God, they're going to come for women's rights, and boy, were we right. They are. And there seemed to be something there for like the first year that really galvanized all of us, the first year or two. And then what happened? There was infighting within the organization, and the vision slowly started to deteriorate because the women started attacking each other. Oh, you're not doing this, or you're doing this, or, I only know kind of peripherally what was happening. And then it really weakened the Women's March movement, even though it's still a thing. It doesn't have the collective fire that it did before. I think maybe because of what you're saying, that people weren't honoring what each woman had to give, and also honoring the fact that maybe our end goals aren't identical. Maybe we have a similar vision for respecting women and allowing women personal autonomy and choice. But so I guess kind of seeing it manifest kind of in our lifetime and then fall apart. I don't even know what we do with that, because that happens a lot in women's groups.
Mhm.
We can't seem to manifest a clear vision. There's a lot of divide and conquer that happens,
Mhm.
or conquering vis-a-vis division.
Mhm.
So I'm not even sure what the question is. That's more just an
Yeah.
observation.
I don't know. I think we're living in a really unprecedented time where the the political and cultural assault of the news and the actions by the president and by the Republican Senate and Congress and by their supporters and by the really, really loud, squeaky wheel of the far conservative right. It's been like trying to take a drink of water from a fire hose for how many years?
Mhm.
And I think that people are exhausted just trying to
Yeah.
keep up
The word exhaustion came to me. Mhm.
with what's going on, and women especially. I mean, look, I think it's really and then on top of the exhaustion of the erosion of the rights and the fact that the government is doing whatever it wants and no one is stopping them, and at the same time uh the economy is going into the toilet, people are struggling to make ends meet. um Women are struggling to carry, the load of their families, their careers, if they have them, or just keep their careers, even if they don't have a family, right? With the
Mhm.
job market now, and the struggles of just trying to keep a roof over your head, food on the table,
Mhm.
keep your job and move forward. um, I think has done a really, I guess, if you want to call something negative, brilliant, has been a really, really powerful and successful strategy in fractioning uh, women's ability to galvanize, women's ability to come together and move forward. Um, because I don't know, I think it's there's a really, I was talking to a friend of mine about this morning, and she's had the honor and the huge challenge of dealing with her aging parents, both of them over, say, the past 5 or so years, as well as trying to keep her very successful business running, as well as trying to help her children and grandchildren, um, basically thrive and grow and do all of these things, as well as being a writer, as well as being an activist. And it's exhausting. You know,
But hasn't it always
in,
been exhausting for women? I think it's always been exhausting. I don't think there was a time when it
the
wasn't.
cultural political pace, I think the fact of 24-hour assault on women's rights, 24-hour assault, the internet, the exposure of the Epstein files, the exposure of things like Motherless, all these are huge revelatory cultural shocks, I think, to a lot of people. And so where do you start and where do you stand at a time when even your rage feels like it's going out into an empty echo chamber?
I want to say that it's important, and I realize many of us have the privilege to do what I'm about to say, and not everybody does. But what I have always suggested often suggested in my work in the past, is to constantly, often through the day, ask yourself, what do I need in this moment? Because if we allow the outside world to bombard us with all these things that you just said, Andrea, we can't find a breath. We are exhausted more. I mean, in some cases, being exposed to everything is, well, it's just not healthy. But for those of us who can ask ourselves, what do we need in this moment, and really go inward and hear what it is that we need, and then give that to ourselves, at least we are not abusing ourselves. If we're in a position we can do that, then we'll have more to give to the collective or to our families or to our community. And I would say that women, we are community beings, and it really is important to be connected to a supportive community. It's really important, because a lot of what we try to do in our day-to-day lives is a model that wasn't really created by women. So we need to keep aligned with who we are as women, our true nature, give ourselves what we need when we can, and take steps to do what we can when we can. Because when you are really connected to yourself and you know what you need and you give it to yourself, it really does change a lot.
Because no one else can give it to you either.
No,
you're the only one that can.
No, you're the only one. And even sometimes all you need to do is connect with whatever's going on inside of you, and it assuages it, and you feel immediately. I mean, acknowledgement is such a big thing. It's one of the most important, I think, and simplest things that most people don't do for themselves and others, acknowledgement. And in fact, well, that's a side. I was gonna say, that's one of the things that children don't get that make them into narcissists, raging narcissists, is that they're never acknowledged as a little one. And so then everything becomes about them. But that's a whole nother discussion. So it's important to know what we need, give it to ourselves in little ways. I need 10 minutes of silence. I need some fresh food tonight. I need to call my girlfriend up. I need to, whatever it is, small little things. And also to speak the truth, whatever that is. And if we are angry, something outside of us may make us angry. There's plenty of stuff. All three of us, have spoken about things on the outside of us that really can piss us off. And once we get that anger, and once the energy of anger is alive within us, then guess what? It's all about us. And that's when we can really tap into our wisdom to hear what it has to say. And you would be surprised at what that message might be. It might clear things up for you, and it may not solve the world's problem, but imagine if every woman in the world was actually listening to her wisdom within and acting upon it, right? So there's something in that, even if that's not the big solution. I think that there is no magic wand for all the things that Andrea you just mentioned, but it may help us understand what the steps are. And there are some people who are born leaders and some people who are made to be leaders, and we do need leaders.
Right.
We need leaders, and we need to have a collective vision and take steps towards that.
Right, like the civil rights movement and all of the work they did for decades to gain their, civil rights, with a lot of nonviolent movements and probably education and allyship and all of the things just added up over time. So I can
I
see
think
that. I've
there's
Go
a
ahead.
there's a there's a fine line, or maybe it's not a fine line, maybe it's a territory. I don't even know. But I agree with everything you're saying in terms of, Lori, in terms of women having to identify internally with their anger, understand where it's coming from, where it generated from, how to deal with it, how to manifest it, how to embody it, how and to take care of themselves. And I'm a big proponent for making sure you don't empty your well, because you'll have nothing to give, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think about, like, even just the civil rights movement, right? The movement was nonviolent, but the response from culture was not nonviolent. There were marches where women and men and children had fire hoses turned on them and were beaten within an inch of their life, right?
Yep.
And so we can tap into ourselves, we can understand what's important to us, we can decide maybe what of one or many issues are most important to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
But is there a point where the action that we take, we have to be willing to engage in some self-sacrifice? We have to be willing to put ourselves and our comfort and our boundaries and all of those things on the line for the betterment of the collective.
Mm-hmm. That is such a great point and a great question. And I'm thinking about Alice Paul in the suffrage movement. She was the first one to do militant tactics, not violent, but really up in your face. She started going to the White House with other women 6 days a week for, like, I forget how long. I don't know if it was months or years. So like a sacrifice. She wasn't home having tea with her friends or, baking cookies or anything or whatever she loved to do. Or maybe she loved picketing the White House, but that was the first picketing thing at the White House in US history, 6 days a week. And she was instrumental in having President Woodrow Wilson, he flip-flopped a little bit, but I agree with you. And we may have to sacrifice, because somebody once told me the root word of sacrifice is to make something sacred, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to say that the more self-full we are, giving ourselves what we need, the more we do have to give and sacrifice. So,
I mean, even in the time of the suffragists, look at Margaret Sanger and what the women who stood up for the beginning of contraceptives, right? And these women who were arrested and put in jail and went on hunger strikes and were
yes, they were force-fed.
And all of this. I mean, we're not talking about
Maybe they didn't think of it as a sacrifice. Maybe it was just the anger that was just like taking them on the journey. And it was like, I'm doing it because I'm willed to do so by something deep inside of me.
Right. I
That's
guess
true.
what I'm saying is that it's that's a whole different level of action, of willing to put themselves and their lives on the line for principles, for ideas,
for a big cause,
for freedom, for liberation.
And people are doing that. The people that have died in the anti-ICE protests. Like Right there, we have them. I mean, the two names that the media put out there, Alex Preddy
Mm.
and that other woman,
And they
right?
did.
But um, I'm sorry, I can't remember everybody's names, but there are plenty of them who have been willing to put their lives on the line for a cause or a principle that they believed in. So it's already happening. And I personally feel like if it's inside of you to put your life, body on the line in some shape or form, it will come from a deep well inside of you. You won't question it, you'll do it.
Well, I
And I
think
think
sometimes though,
if history pushes us that way,
I think
it
sometimes
will.
it's put upon you. Sometimes people you go to a protest, like they go to protest an ICE facility or a detention center, or they go to do whatever, and they're peacefully protesting. You plan to go to a peaceful protest, and something goes awry with law enforcement, or something goes awry with a counter protester, or someone someone decides to drive a car,
But
right?
I think when you go to a protest, it should be in your mind that you know that anything could happen. If I were to go to a protest, even if I knew it was peaceful, there would be a part of me that no, I need to be prepared for anything, for some psycho that comes up starts waving his gun in front of us. Like, I think that is a responsible response to making the choice to go to a protest, for example.
Yeah.
Now, if you're eh, like, unfortunately, like in a war zone, and that's put upon you, and you have to make choices from that place, that's different.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a different
I may
experience.
be a little bit of a cynic, I guess, but I guess from my perspective, from my perspective of being an old lady, looking back, right, and seeing this in social media, and who knows, maybe it's just my feed because the algorithm. What are you going to do? But there's a real movement, not among all women, but among a lot of women, to be very precious with their time and their energy and their self, and it seems to be becoming a very um like an inward facing black hole of energy, that it's all about
Mhm.
the self, that it's all about me, that it's all about me taking care of me, that's the only universe really that matters, because that's all I can control, right? And so there becomes this real um focus on the self, and not how the self interacts with the collective.
Or both are very important.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I see that too, and I do. I think there's definitely something worth critiquing in that, for sure. But I don't think, I think you can be both checking in and taking care of yourself and be like really
Oh, of
active. I
course.
think you need the balance. It's the extremes that tend to be the problem, and it's the Buddhist way. Find the
The
middle
middle
way.
way, the middle path.
Well, I think when we still have comfort and privilege, we can take advantage of that. But when push comes to shove, there's so many women in the world who don't have that. And they just show up and they fight, and you know, they just run into the fire. And so we're not at that point yet. And hopefully there's not a yet that we have to do that. Um, so, I mean, everything I've shared, I'm speaking from my personal experience. I haven't been I haven't been raised in a collective place where war, like what's going on in various places of the world. I don't even know what I would do. And I think in those situations, survival instinct takes over, you know?
Hmm.
So there, you're not focused on like the self, but you're just focused on your being to survive and your family, your friends, or whatever. There's so many different levels of what we're talking about, from the very small microcosm to this huge big one. Um,
And we didn't even really get to the goddess. I know that the goddess eventually factored into your um, not just experience of anger, but I mean, she's still with you in terms of living her, embodying her. S- I actually don't really know your relationship with Goddess, only that you've shared how important that journey has been with you. Can you speak to it all? How she is? how she relates to you, or how you relate to her in terms of your journey with anger and your embodying your inner bitch?
Yeah. Well, I would say that it started with my work in Africa, because I was given that, as I told you, I was given the name after the creation goddess, Nambi, and she birthed all of humanity. But she was blamed for death. She was still blamed for a lot of things because, the patriarchal society said, oh, if there's anything wrong in life, it's the woman who gave us life, it's her fault. So, and I saw so many things in Africa, in Uganda, was specifically in the Uganda kingdom that I worked, that people just tried to take advantage of, and I had to give speeches on to the children and tell girls what they should wear in order not to be taken advantage of. And I hated that, but if it was going to save their lives, I thought, okay, I can do that. So that gave me this whole different international experience, and yet I was named after the woman who gave life to all of humanity, because children called me mother. And then the goddess, that whole lineage of receptivity, which I didn't have any of it. I wasn't even open to receive any goodness. I was acting like I can give and I can fix and I can do. And so I didn't really get anything I needed from anybody. So I had to do what I would have shared with you both, is ask myself what I need. And when I started giving myself what I needed, I got it from everybody. And now in my writing the novel with the Black Madonna in the background, she just holds this space for women to be acknowledged and giving them a voice, because for centuries, as we know, women, that's been taken away from women. So I realize in everything I do is helping women have a voice, and that's how, and I can't really help through my fiction writing or anything I do if I don't do that for myself.
Right.
So that's kind of how it started in my life, my work in Africa, given the goddess named Nambi, and then up until now, writing and with the Black Madonna with black skin. So somehow, Africa, the Black Madonna, this darkness, the shadow self, which is just part of the light, but we're not. We have to own it. We have to see it. We have to be with it. And for me, that has been by looking inward. And it's been my greatest source of strength and leadership, is knowing myself so that I can help other people know themselves. And then as a community, who are we as a community?
Wow. Wow, what a beautiful introduction to the goddess, huh? Through your experience in
Oh,
Uganda.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have to wrap up here pretty soon. Andrea, did you have anything else you wanted to share,
No, just
state?
thank you, Lori, for coming and talking about these really important ideas and how women can sort of try to find either swinging between the poles, right? To try to find the middle ground, or try to get centered and think about, integrating different aspects of ourselves in order to find ways that we can help, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's important to know that to never give up, whatever that means to any woman. Just don't give up, and find
And
a supportive community.
yeah, and I'm really struck by this idea of creating a collective vision that we can all rally behind. And maybe we're not at a point where we have a massive national or international vision, but at least I think if we can find maybe a local vision that we can, whether it's like, joining a local community garden that like to grow their own food for the communities, even something that small, I think is effective personally. I'm sorry, Lori, thank you. Do you have any other last words beyond what you just said that you'd like to share that hasn't been said or wants to be said?
I'm a woman of not too few words. So no, I think that if you have questions or anybody has a questions, they can connect with me through my website or social media or whatever. But no, just, there's a line in my novel that I'm writing, and when we search within, what we find is stronger than any army. And I just think that I believe that wholeheartedly. So whatever we find within, we can use on the outside world. when we have the opportunity to have that. And I think the three of us, at least, we have the privilege of sitting with ourselves to find out what that is.
Yeah.
And so don't sacrifice that gift, that blessing, thinking that we have to do something else in the moment. Because when we have that blessing and that gift, it's one of the most important things we can do. That's from my experience. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So to everybody at home, you can learn more about Lori in the YouTube text box. There's a link to her website. If the TED Talk is not in there, it will be in there very soon. And links to her books. And like she said, you can contact her to find out more, to ask questions or to learn more. Links to what Dr. Andre and I are up to are also in the YouTube text box. So thank you so much. Thank you, Zeph, as always, for being here and sharing your insights. Lori, I'm sorry we didn't integrate them into the conversation, but he was basically cheering us on. And
That's great.
yeah,
That's great.
So-
I love what you two are doing. So thank you so much for what you two are doing. It's important. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming to us all the way from Italy and anchoring another feminist viewpoint on the planet.
Yeah, you're welcome. I gave up my driver's license theory lesson. I have to get a driver's license. I was studying for that. But no, it was such a pleasure to be with you and to talk about this, because these things really, they bring me alive. They remind me of who I am and why I'm here. So it's important to have community to see yourself through. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure. Thank you again, Lori and Andrea. And we'll see everybody next week. I think next week we're debuting the episode with Dr. Emma on the dangerous V. She wrote a book on the vagina dentata. So we spoke to her about that. So
that sounds fun.
Yeah, it is. It was a lot of fun. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye.